Roe's reversal fueling passions, anger over the Supreme Court's decision showing no signs of cooling. In Arizona, Friday's protest outside the state capitol ended in a cloud of tear gas. Police made the call after the protesters started pounding on the glass doors of the state Senate building. Nobody got into that building, but there was damage done to public memorials across the street. While there were 0 arrests there, the nature of political protests in this country seems to have shifted, and this is not isolated to any one party. My next guests see that reality in Arizona. Talk show host Mike Broomhead and Clint Hickman, vice chair of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, who stood up to pressure from former President Trump to interfere with the 2020 election. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
All right,
Thanks.
Let's talk about this issue of things going off the rails, if you will. What do you think has changed?
Here we are, my party, angry people on my side of the aisle, and should be furious, as we all should be, that there are protests and violent protests and threats against Supreme Court justices. But go back 6 months or a year, whenever it was, there were over 100 people from my side of the aisle out in front of his house where he had to have sheriff's deputies making threats of arrests and scaring his wife and his children and his neighbors. So if both sides don't agree that there is extremism on both sides and we don't all shout it down, I think this is going to happen for a long time until both sides say it has to stop, whether it's our side of the aisle or the other side of the aisle.
Mike, I want to address that. We were looking at some of the video outside of Clint's house where people did show up. And we're seeing this more and more where protesters, whether you are on the left or you are on the right, are showing up at people's homes, whether it is a Supreme Court justice, as happened recently, or it is a politician that you disagree with. But in this case, weren't they people who were Republican that showed up at your house, Mike?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Mike. Yeah, they were. It was on a Sunday night. Some people were upset with the board certifying the vote in 2020. They showed up, and the good thing is I had a little bit of a drop on it. Some people called me and gave me a couple hours to prepare, and because of that, I was able to have a couple sheriff deputies there to greet them as they came down my street, and also had a little time to warn my neighbors. And this is the part that I'm really concerned with, especially with the Supreme Court justices. You have people coming into residential areas. You know, those Supreme Court justices were appointed to a position. I ran for this position. But the neighbors, my neighbors, their neighbors, never would have considered people walking down the street and screaming horrible things. They're there to live and grow their families, so it has to stop.
Mike, when you speak to your listeners, and I know they are very passionate, what do they tell you fuels their anger and what might push them to cross that line?
You know, and I don't get, to be honest, I haven't talked to many people that are talking about that anger other than they feel like the election was stolen and that the only way to get their point across is to be violent. There was a protester, I was watching TV before I came here, and there was a protester, they were talking about not being able to get into our state capitol because fencing is now erected around it, and someone was upset about it. And this protester said, if this is the only way we can get our point across, this is what we're going to do. And that's a horrible way to think, and none of us should condone it.
Clint, you have felt that pressure from the most powerful man on the planet. You refused to take former President Trump's calls because he was trying to have an influence on the 2020 election. What was that like, and how have people responded to you?
I didn't take the call. I'm still incredibly happy I didn't take the call, because if I would have taken the call, who knows where that would have gone. I know for a fact it would have gone one place. I would have probably been in Washington, D.C., testifying right alongside Speaker of the House, Rusty Bowers, because we were dealing with some of the same pressures from the same people. And I couldn't, you know, his testimony would have been my testimony at that time.
Can I ask you one last question? Do you both agree that if leadership, politicians in the view of all people who are supposed to be leaders are using language like enemy, like evil, when they're talking about specific people or talking about a group of people, that is helping to fuel this push towards very high anger and potential violence?
I agree 100%. And I would extend that also to people like you and I that are in the media business in any capacity, whether they're journalists or talk radio opinion people. I agree with you. Anybody that's got a loud voice like that, if they're doing that, they're perpetuating that kind of anger.
And I would like to say I don't like the use of militaristic terms or threats of violence and calling people straight out evil. I've always been brought up to the point where the Republicans are a team and the Democrats are a team, and our teams are going to contest and hopefully win their elections and push this country forward. I do not like the use of any types of pejoratives that say other people are evil for trying to get their point across. It's just not right.
Gentlemen, thank you for coming on. Clint Hickman and Mike Broomhead, I really appreciate your time. And we will be right back.
Thanks.
Thank you.